Hello and welcome to Behavioral Economics and Psychology in Marketing. In this course, you'll learn what's going on in your customers' minds, what drives their behaviors and shapes their decisions. This is the first time that 4 world-class experts from around the world got together to create a unique online course on how to use the insights from decades of research in psychology and behavioral economics in marketing. My name is Matej Sucha and I'm the founder and CEO of MindWorks Behavioral Consulting. Behavioral economics is a beautiful mix of psychology, sociology, neuroscience, economics, which sheds a light on how we behave, how we make decisions, and perceive things. It helps us predict customer behavior, and most importantly, it gives us the tools to influence it and change it. Now imagine I flip a coin. If you lose, you give me 50 bucks. How much would you ask for if you win? To even consider playing the game with me? I suppose it wouldn't be 50, it might not even be 100, it might be much more. And this is basically what loss aversion is about. We are much more sensitive to losses than we are to gains. Actually, research shows that we are twice, maybe 2.5 times more sensitive to losses than we are to gains. What does it imply? That just by reframing one message from the possibility to gain something to the chance of losing something, you might become much more persuasive. There's one study which nicely illustrates this principle. So researchers wanted to find out if people would be more likely to buy insulation for their houses depending on what kind of message they get. So they divided households into 2 groups. They went to the first group of households and gave a presentation of the benefits of insulation. And the main message was, if you insulate, you save 50 cents every single day. The second group got the same kind of presentation. But this time the main message was, if you do not insulate, you will lose 50 cents every single day. So which one do you think was more effective? Of course, since we're talking about loss aversion, it was the second message, the one highlighting what people will lose if they fail to insulate. Actually, the chance that the person would opt for insulation rose by 150% when the framing was losses rather than gains. One client we worked with was a telco operator, and we worked on an SMS campaign with them. In this specific campaign, they had a package of data for free for their customers. And so they were thinking how to design the message so that the most clients, the most customers activate the package. In order to activate the package, you had to answer yes to the message you received. So the original message that they designed was, if you want a package of data for free, answer yes to this message and we will activate it for you. We told them, look, there is something called endowment effect, and if we want to use it, we shouldn't tell customers to do something in order to get something. We should tell them that they already own it. So how did the new message sound was, we've given you a package of data for free. It's ready to be used. Just answer yes to this message and we will activate it for you. Can you feel the difference? In the second message, they already own it. They don't have to do anything else in order to get it. They already have it, and if they do not answer, if they do not activate it, they will lose it. So again, endowment effect. The customers feel like they already owning it, and the chance that they will do what the operator wanted them to do increased. And they tested the two messages, and that's exactly what the results showed. The second message was much more effective. Rory Sutherland, one of the most influential people in modern marketing, vice chairman of Ogilvy, and the biggest proponent of the use of psychology in marketing.
Context is a marketing super weapon, because if you change the context or the comparative set, or you change the choice architecture, you're having as much effect as if you change the product at a tiny fraction of the cost.
This is it. It's so cheap and so effective.
It's absolutely magnificent. You know, you can take something that's shit and make it brilliant by changing the way someone looks at it. I mean, here would be a classic example. Okay, a friend of mine who left Ogilvy to work for Danone, which is a French yogurt powerhouse. It's like the General Electric of yogurt, right? And the French have far too much yogurt. I have no clue what's going on. Have you noticed this? You go to a French supermarket, the yogurt aisle is like, you can see the curvature of the earth. The fucking yogurt aisle is so long. And they're all the same. They're all plain yogurts. You're going, French people, come on, simplify, you know. But anyway, he went there, and a classic example, okay, is they had a kind of drinking yogurt, and they were desperate to get it into the milk aisle because that has the highest traffic in the supermarket. And they got in the milk aisle, and a couple of people who knew a bit about behavioral economics said, "Are you sure?" They said, "Well, why would you not want to be in the highest traffic area of the supermarket?" Which is what an economist would assume, right? Okay, I either want the product or I don't, therefore put it where everybody sees it. So the trouble is that when you're buying milk, you're thinking 58p, 70p, £1.10, and this drink costs, you know, £2.10. If you put it in the milk aisle, it's going to look sodding expensive. If you put it in the premium yogurt aisle, it's going to look cheap. I mean, the classic example being Maserati and Rolls-Royce selling their cars not at car shows where they look really expensive, but selling them at yacht and plane shows, where it's kind of an impulse buy, you know. Well, I didn't buy a Learjet this year, I'll have a couple of those, you know. A beautiful example of behavioral economics as a case study was one performed by one of the great, I think it was George Lois, the great New York ad man, who had to sell off end-of-year Renaults in New York. And the standard thing they did is they dropped the price of the car further and further and further to get rid of their stock. And he simply understood the behavioral principle that a discount that we've earned has a higher perceived value than a discount that's handed to us on a plate. So he went around the unsold Renaults from the previous year's stock with a scalpel and placed a small nick in the paintwork, somewhere discreet, like in a wheel arch. And then he put a sticking plaster over it. And then he ran advertising that said, if you can find the flaw in the paintwork in the Renault so-and-so, we'll give you $500 off. And the perceived value of that was vastly higher than advertising $500 off to everybody. So at the very simplest level, money is not money. When you've got a $500 discount, you've got to ask yourself the question, what is the most psychologically dynamic way in which we can portray this discount so it has the highest perceived value? Because if there's one thing that economics assumes is that, that money has an absolute value and that perceived value doesn't matter. That is patently untrue. Whether something's expensive or cheap depends on the context in which you're buying it. And so there are really, really simple things we can do which just go, right, first thing is assume that economics may not be true, assume that mathematical models, however logical they look, may be disguising as much as they reveal. And thirdly, assume that what consumers tell you when you research them isn't the full story. And what you enjoy, particularly if you're free to test it, is a spectacular creative liberation. The number of ways you are now free to succeed and gain competitive advantage expands by a factor of 5 or 10. And you suddenly end up succeeding in ways that logic would never have taken you to, and neither would market research. How can that be bad?
Sam Tatum, Behavioral Strategy Director at Ogilvy Consulting and one of the young rising stars of the field.
In a now infamous study in 2000, Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper from Columbia University and Stanford conducted a study around jam and the sales of jam in a local store. What they were doing is sampling the jam and then seeing the sales of jam, and they had two different conditions here. In one condition, they had 24 different jams on offer. And on a second condition, they had only 6. And what they found was on 24, they had lots of interest, lots of people sampling the different jams. But they also found that few people bought them. I think they found 40% of people bought the jam when it was 6 jars and only 3% of 24. So lots of interest doesn't necessarily mean converting. So while there are lots of appealing, rational reasons why choice can be good, the cognitive load and the choice overload that we might experience can actually prevent us. So in 1956, George Miller wrote an article, The Magical Number 7 plus or minus 2. Basically an article written off the back of lots of investigation around the cognitive capacity of humans. Miller found that people could recall between 5 or 9 different pieces of information in working memory, with 7 being the average of this. And through this research, Miller coined the term chunking, showing that it was able for people to retain and process more information if it was chunked up and meaningfully composed together. So if you imagine, let's look at a long string of numbers. So in the UK, I think a mobile phone number is 11 digits. And we might think of it being read out as sort of 07446469421 in a row. Very hard to recall and process. So what we find is that people tend to sort of break the number down. They break the number down by the area code, so 07. Then they break down the next 3 digits, 446, and then the next 3 digits, 469, and the next 3 digits, 421. So by breaking down a long stream of information that goes beyond the barriers of 7 plus or minus 2, we can start to make it easier for people to process and make a decision. There's a lovely term known as the "but you are free" effect. So, but you are free to exit, you're free to continue, you're free to bail from the cart. And what we've actually found, based on sort of, again, complex choices or rich choice environments, that people might not feel the ease of progressing. And simply reminding people, but you're free to exit or you're free not to purchase, you can actually encourage the opposite, to make people feel more confident in the decision that they've made. So in 42 different studies, they found a 50% increase in sales and transactions when the "but you are free" effect was used. And this has spanned from good causes to asking people to fill out a survey, even asking people to donate for a bus ticket. So if you want someone to do something, or if you want to encourage someone to be free to make a choice, and when choice is more complex, a counterintuitive response might be reminding them that they're free to turn away. And empowering our user and reminding them of their ability and self-efficacy to move away, we can actually encourage them to make the decision.
Dan Ariely, professor at the Duke University, best-selling author, and the most famous behavioral economist in the world.
One topic that we usually don't think about, but it actually is very, very important for pricing, is the question about fairness and effort. So let's start by thinking about fairness. Imagine the following case. Imagine you come to downtown Durham, where I live, and you're looking for a parking spot. And you're parking by a parking meter, and you look in your pocket and you don't have a quarter. And somebody passes by, and you say, "Excuse me, do you have a quarter by any chance?" And that person says, "Yes, I have a quarter. I'll sell it to you for $1. How do you feel? Most people say something nasty. Say, "I'm not paying you $1 for a quarter. This is just wrong. I'll take my chances with City Hall. Maybe I will not get a ticket." Case number 2. You're coming, parking, downtown Durham, parking meter, you park, no quarter, somebody passes by, and you say, "Excuse me, do you have a quarter?" And that person says, "No, I don't have a quarter. But I'll tell you what, there's a bank 4 blocks down the street. If you want, I'll run really fast to that bank. I'll change $1 for quarters. I'll come back. But if I do all this effort, I run there and I run back. How do you feel about paying me $1? Now think about those cases. In the first case, people are not willing to pay $1 for a quarter. In the second case, people are really happy to pay $1 for a quarter. They actually feel it's a great deal. In an objective way, you're worse off in the second case than in the first case. You have to wait for somebody to run and come back and you get a sweaty coin, but you are happier. Why are you happier? Because somebody ran for you. You see, when we think about how people evaluate whatever we give them, a bottle of water, a service, whatever it is, we often think that people can evaluate the intrinsic quality of what they're getting. This jacket, what's the value of that jacket? But the reality is that fairness plays a really important part in this, and fairness actually changes how much we evaluate something and therefore how much we're willing to pay. The same product, a quarter, can be evaluated as a quarter or can be evaluated as more, even a quarter. And the reason I like this example with a quarter is it's a quarter. We know how much it's worth it. But when somebody ran for us, we feel like we're willing to pay more for it. Which industries are really good at showing us effort and therefore getting us to pay more? Can you come up with some lists? One industry that is really good is the food industry. If you go to a good restaurant, think about how the menu is structured. They tell you how long the fish had to travel, where the fish came from, and they tell you how many hours the vegetables were marinated. And we have open kitchens, and we see lots of work, and things are happening, and so on. And all of a sudden, we're willing to pay a lot for it. Another example, think about Apple. Every time that Apple has a press announcement, they talk to us about all the little details. The designers, look at the hinges. They say, look at the hinges, how they open, and look at the metal, and look at the thinness. And they tell us how impressive this is. And they give us a story about how much they work to make it slightly thinner and how much they work to make the metal exactly like that. And you might say, I could have evaluated this way without all these speeches. The answer is no. Those speeches, showing us effort, showing us what has gone into it, is incredibly important.
And every year in the UK, volunteers go out and hand out millions of envelopes, put through people's doors, or if they're in, handed in person. And a week later, the volunteers come back and they collect the envelopes, hopefully with a donation, either in cash or cheque or credit card enclosed in the envelope. And we actually tested 6 things for the purposes of keeping this narrative memorable. I'm going to tell you about 4. One of the things we tested made complete logical sense. It was to flag the fact on the envelope that if you ticked the box for gift aid and put your name on the envelope, for every £1 you gave to the charitable cause, the government contributed an extra 25p minimum, because that's what the government does when you give to charity under your own name. If you are a taxpayer, it actually essentially rebates the donation to the charity to make your donation tax-free. Whether, by the way, there's a better way of incentivizing charitable giving, I think there might be, and I'm coming to that now. The 3 other things we're testing, make no logical sense whatsoever to anybody who believes economics is true. No consumer would have suggested them in research. The only reason we tested them is our behavioral science instincts told us they might make a difference. And the 3 things were as follows. 1, mention on the envelope that it had been hand-delivered by a volunteer. In other words, it wasn't a standard door drop. The person from the charity had actually gone to the trouble of putting it through your door. We thought this would create a kind of Cialdini reciprocation effect. The second one was making the flap of the envelope along the narrow edge of the envelope, not the broad edge of the envelope. We just thought that envelopes you put money in are more commonly in that format, and your donation would feel safer if the flap were thinner. But we almost thought it was an affordance, to use design language of Don Norman, that when you have an envelope that's that shape, you naturally think you ought to put some money or a cheque in it. Okay? The third thing we tested was making the paper of a higher quality. And costly signalling theory. That was what we were basing that on. That and also, I suppose, you know, just an element of reciprocation. That, you know, if you're giving something that has some sort of perceived discretionary cost, then perhaps the urge to reciprocate is a bit stronger. Here's what happens, okay?